All right. It's good to be here. Lee hit me up earlier in the, I guess this weekend, I want to know if I'd be ready to teach just in case. And then it turned into, well, why don't you teach anyway? But I think they're still waiting on go, ready to go. So hopefully all that will go well with Krista. And maybe see how everything ends up. But I took a little bit of a liberty. We're supposed to be talking Daniel 11. And after I got to doing my stuff, we're starting in Daniel 9. I have 30 slides and 30 minutes, so that ought to tell you something. We're going fast. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. And starting in Daniel 9, if you want to go ahead and be in Daniel chapter 9, and we've already covered this, so it'll be relatively fresh on your minds. What is it that Daniel perceives or figures out in verse 1 of Daniel 9? Or even verse 2. Okay, the number of years of captivity that was told by Jeremiah, and it was 70 years, right? And how long had they been there when he perceives this at this point? $70 years. Pretty much 70 years. So Daniel realizes, hey, we're supposed to be here 70 years, and we've been here 69 and a half. And so he has this prayer to God. And what is the purpose of the prayer? High level. We've sinned. I've sinned. Forgive us. Do what you said. Fulfill your promise that we'll go home. So verse 19, what is the ask at the end of the prayer in verse 19? Somebody. Okay. Hear us, don't delay. So, and Gabriel comes, he talks with him, and he gives him talks about these 70 weeks, or these 77s, I guess the literal translation is 77s. And what do these 70 weeks represent? Is it weeks, literal weeks, or what is it? Years, right? Every day's a year. Gives us 490 years, right? So what are these 490 years? And he tells us it's divided into 7 weeks is one period, and in the middle is 62 weeks, and at the end there's one more week. So the first section is 49 years, and then they have a period of about 434 years, and at the very end we have 49 years. And that's how these 490 years are broken up. So, when do they start? First off, I got to know. So they're in captivity 70 years. But when does the 70 start? And when does it end? As far as starting, we have 3 dates that I think that it could be, that it only could be. It's got to be one of these 3. And it would be the 3 times that Babylon came and ravaged the city. 607, 597, and 587. That's really the only possibilities in my mind. So if you're going 70 years, that means that the 70 years were up either in 537, 527, or 517. So which one is it? If it's 607 to 537, in 537, Cyrus gives the command to return home. So there's 70 years at 607 to 537. Fits well. If we go from 587 and go 70 years, the temple was dedicated in 517. So is it 587 to 517 is your 70 years? The 597 to 527, there's nothing that matches up. There's no events that fit well. So it's got, to me, it's one of these two. The 70-year period was one of these two periods. What do you think? Anybody have an idea of which one may fit better? And I'm saying I don't have an answer. I have a thought. I have the one I think it is. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that is a good reason for the first one because it states from the going forward of the command to go, and that happened in 537. So that makes 607 to 537 fit. I lean toward the other one because it's from the destruction of the temple to the temple is back, which to me means God is no longer there, to the temple is back, and God is back in his presence. Either one fits, and I don't think it matters. It's one or the other in my mind. So, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge thing. But I do believe it's one of those two. Anything else? Okay. The 490 years that we get told about. Again, it's 490 years. When does it start? When does it end? This is the more important one in my mind because this 490 years is going to tell us when the end. Because what we've discussed it is it what's the I know it's verse 14. Is it chapter 10 or chapter 11, verse 14, where the angel says, Daniel, this 490 years I'm going to tell you what? What is the purpose of him telling him? Anybody remember? I was going more for where he says, I'm going to tell you about your people, the end of your people. All right? So, who is Daniel's people? The Jews. And more specifically, the Jewish nation. So everything in these 490 years, to me, everything about it has to be about the Jewish nation. It can't be about anything hard stop 80-70. At 80-70, we're done. It has to be, the 490 years has to end at least by 80-70 because the Jewish nation does not exist. It could be before that, but it cannot be after it. So, if we say it ends at the death of Jesus, that puts it around 30 AD. You subtract the 490 years and you get back to 460 BC. So did something happen in 460 BC that could be the start? Don't know. Could it be the destruction of Jerusalem is the end of the 490 years? That means the 490 years start on 420. Did anything happen in 420? Don't know. Here's our starting point that we're told in Daniel 9:25. From the going out to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of the Anointed One, a prince, there'll be 7 weeks. So that's our first 7 weeks of the 70 weeks. It starts from the going out of the word to restore. There's our key word. So here's our possible starting points. If it's 460, 420, just that's our two that I think we could be. In 537 BC, Ezra 1. Cyrus gives the command to return. I don't think it's 537. It doesn't fit. Because the 490 years would have been up 50 years BC. 515 BC, Darius gives the command to complete the temple, and Zechariah rebuilds. So 515 comes close. 457 BC, in Ezra 7, can't hardly read it, but Artaxerxes gives the command and the funds and the official notification to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Where did we see those words a while ago? Restore, rebuild. So I think 457 is our starting point, which is real close to the 460, which gets us to the death of Jesus. That's what I feel. Theoretically, it could have been, I don't know, it could have been the 515. That's still way too early in my mind. Because to me, he said 490 years, and it's 490 years. It's not figurative. It is an actual 490 years. And the only one of these three dates that fit is 457. I don't think there's anything you can find that gets you to 70 AD. Just nothing happens as a starting point. That sort of makes sense? Everybody see? You may got questions. Okay, so our 7 weeks, our first 7 weeks, would have been from 537 to 409. What's happening during that time period? What's going on? Anybody got any thoughts? All of that stuff happened. They're going back. They're told to go back. They're told to go back to build the temple. They're told back. Nehemiah goes back and builds the wall. It's all the work in that 49 years. Almost all of the work to rebuild Jerusalem happens during those 49 years. The work to rebuild is the first 7 weeks in my mind. So the return, the restoration, the building of the city, the building of the temple, and then we have 62 weeks, which is from 409 BC to 26 AD. Would be the time period. What happens during that period? A lot of quietness, a lot of nothing. A lot of things are happening, but it's not a lot of importance. And think about this. The Jewish leaders, in Babylon for that matter, had this information. So around, they wouldn't have called it this, but around the turn of the century from BC to AD, they should have started looking, right? Hey, it's getting close. We need to watch. They should have known it's getting close to whatever Daniel was talking about, whatever he was told, is fixing to happen. They should have known that. In a lot of ways they did. Josephus writes about, starting about 50 BC, there were writings that they knew and they were watching. So, they knew. The birth of Jesus, how did the Magi, how did the wise men know to be looking? They had this writing. They knew. Something's going to happen to Daniel's people, and it's getting close to time to happening. We need to watch and see what's going on. They knew. They should have known. Okay, so our 1 week, based on our 490 years, would have started around 26 AD and ended 33 AD. That time frame sound familiar? What's going on at 26 AD? Close to it. Who's around? Who's talking? John the Baptist. We're getting ready. The Messiah's coming. A lot of things I'll read, a lot of things you look and see, and you can take everything with a grain of salt. But a lot is said about the baptism of Jesus is the beginning of this last week. Sort of kind of lines up. Doesn't have to be. But it's when the Messiah starts his ministry. All right, and we're told in the middle of this last week, it said in the middle of the last week, times and a half a time, halfway through this 26 to 33, he would bring an end to sacrifice and offering. What ended sacrifice and offering? Death of Christ. The death, burial, and resurrection ended, or should have ended, the purpose of sacrifice. And that happened right in the middle of 26 to 33, which puts it at 29:30. Lines up pretty close, right? Makes sense to me. So, if that happened in the middle of this last week, what happens the rest? What happens the rest of the week, the next 3.5 years? Why would that be important? Why wasn't the death, burial, resurrection at the end of the period? Start of the new covenant. Going out and preaching. Going where? First, Jerusalem, and then farther out, and then where? The whole world. Let's go back to Daniel's people. Who was Daniel's? This is all about Daniel's people. Who was Daniel's people? The Jews, the nation of Israel. What is special about the nation of Israel? How would you describe the nation of Israel? God's chosen people. At the end of the 490 years, would the physical nation of Israel be considered God's chosen people? No, spiritual Israel is. What was the big change from what physical Israel was to what the church became? What's the last turning point? Gentiles included. When did that happen? Who? Who was it? Cornelius. Acts 10. When did it happen? I'm not 100%. I have nothing to base it on. But is it possible it happened 3.5 years after Jesus was crucified? My gut feel is no. My gut feel is it was later. But it was the beginning of the end for Israel being God's chosen people. So, in all of this, and even chapter 11, things can get I can't nail it down. There's a lot of things that kind of fit. There's a lot of things that you can't quite make it fit. But to me, that is part of it. Halfway through the last week, 3.5 years left, Jesus dies, buried, resurrected, and they go into all the world preaching the gospel. And then at the end of the next 3.5 years, something's complete. And it's just kind of what that something is up to speculation, and you'll find all kind of stuff as to what it could be. Any thoughts on any of this? Yeah. I don't think it's in the 490 years. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that people throw out is the 77 is a completeness, and it very well may be. But to me, everything else lines up. I mean, you get to the end of the sixth, if you stay, it starts at a certain time, and then the beginning of that last week lines up exactly with the ministry of Jesus. Then that last week has to be the same. You can't switch. But again, it's not easy. It's not easy. And you think this is an easy, wait to chapter 11. That'll make your head hurt. It has happened. And that's, again, I always go back to the statement, this involves your people, Daniel. And your people was the nation of Israel, because that's what he was concerned about. He was concerned about his people getting out of captivity in Babylon and going home, and his people here. It's the same his people. So, it has to have ended. Everything that Daniel prophesied and was told had to have ended. 87 being a drop-dead date. It had to be done. Anything else? Okay. Now to chapter 11, which is what we're supposed to talk about. There's a lot of stuff in here. It just goes and it goes. I've done this I'll go through it several times, and you get about halfway through the chapter, and it's like, oh, I can't do anymore. It's just too much. All right. So next week, Lee is going to just nail it all down and have it all figured out. He's going to get the 1,290 days all figured out and everything. Well, that's what you got to. Why the 12? Was it 12,990 to 1335? Why the difference? You're going to explain that to us. But this is probably, if you've never read it, and I hope you have, the most detailed prophecies and the longest span of just detail after detail after detail that you can line up and know exactly who he's talking about. No doubt. And it's just amazing to read it. So, have your Bibles out. We're going to go pretty fast. I got 10 minutes. We're pretty much going to go through it pretty fast because it's a lot of reading, and you can look at it, and basically I've got written down on the next however many slides, best guess of who it applies to. So Daniel 1 through 4, he talks about the Medes and the Persian, and then Greece coming with the mighty king. Who's the mighty king? Alexander the Great. This is probably 100 to 150 years before him. If it stopped right here, that's amazing in and of itself. Said he'll do what he wishes. He came through, and anybody he went after, he conquered. He had no trouble conquering the entire world. Fast. Said the kingdom will be divided, but not to his people. Who got his kingdom? 4 generals, right? Wife and kids dead. They weren't around. So his kingdom was divided, but not to his people. Went to the 4 winds. North, south, east, west. And we'll talk the rest of the chapter about kings of the north and kings of the south. You don't ever hear anything about east and west. Why? Anybody got any ideas? Any thoughts? Okay, there's water. What was Daniel told? What is he being told about? His people. The north kingdoms, or the south, is Egypt. Will be Egypt. All their kings' names start with a P, and I'm not going to try to say it. Polly, something, whatever. Somebody say it? Oh, Colby, what is it? Tell me. The what? The P silent? Okay, yeah. What Colby said. The king of the north is Syria. So we have Syria and Egypt. What's right here? What's in the middle? Judea. We're talking about Daniel's people, right? So when the king of the north goes down to fight the king of the south, what does he do? He stomps right down the middle of Judea. And when the king of the south goes up to fight, right through the middle of Judea, it affects Daniel's people. And the times where they stopped in the middle and fought, it affects Daniel's people. That's why it focused on the king of the north and the kings of the south. Because it affected Daniel's people. Okay. Verse 5. And y'all have to read. Let's see. We'll look at it. All right, we have the king of the south is strong, but the other king is even stronger. This is what's commonly called the First Syrian War. It lasts 100 years or more. We have king of the south is strong. Say it again, Colby. Ptolemy? Ptolemy 1. He was one of Alexander's generals. And since it's called the king of the south, not king of Egypt, because they had all this land. This is what they ruled. Okay? King of the north was stronger. This is the prince that's talking. Well, one of his princes shall be stronger. His princes is Alexander's princes, not the king. So that helps clear up. This is the king of the north, and his name is Seleucus. I get that right? And he's one of Alexander's princes. He's stronger. And it cut off a little bit, but he reigned Syria to India and Mesopotamia. He had a huge area up north. King of the north, not just Syria. Okay. Daniel 6. After they fought for a couple of 100 years, not quite that long, but close, they make an alliance. And the daughter of Ptolemy II, because we've gone several years, he's the next king. Sends his daughter to marry the king of the north. Only problem is the king of the north is already married. So he divorces his wife and marries Berenice. I've seen it spelled with the second E and not the second E. I don't know which it's supposed to be. Bad things happen. Depending on who you trust, the daughter's father dies, and as soon as the father dies, Ptolemy's done with her, divorces her and remarries his first wife. Only the first wife is not real happy, so she kills them all. Kills her husband, Bernice, and Bernice's children. I think just one son. Or she kills them while they're married just to get rid of them. One of the two things happened. She got rid of them. That's prophesied, and that's what happened. Again, stop right here. It's enough. Several hundred years before Daniel's told about it. Okay, verses 7 through 9. Ptolemy the third, we're going to another one, and it's Bernice's brother. He takes revenge because his sister was killed. Again, he's Egypt. He's going to go up to Syria and fight Syria, king of the north, because they killed his sister. He wins the battle. Who's the son of the wife, the divorced wife, Seleucus II. Start his army. His navy was lost at sea. His army was defeated. There was talk of a sedition against him in Syria, so he left to go back to take care of that. And again, if you read, a branch from her roots will arise in his place. He'll come with the army, enter it. He'll deal with them and prevail. Ptolemy came up, and he prevailed. He carried everything off to Egypt. Then the king of the north will come back. His sons will wage war. I mean, you read history, and it lines up. All right, so 11, verse 10 is a summary of the next 50 years. Okay? Antiochus, and I butcher that, I'm sorry. He initially was not successful in his battles, but eventually he was. These are actual battles that happened that line up with where we went. Okay? Verse 13, we're into 204 BC. We're halfway through the 400 years. With the help from Macedonians, Antiochus is able to defeat the king of the south. Remember that name. Verse 11 through 17, we start getting the Jews starting to get involved in all of this. And they're trying to influence basically who's going to rule over them. Verse 15, Antiochus takes the city of Sidon. And you read, the king of the north will come up and take a well-fortified city, Sidon. It's well known. And then he takes Palestine. So the Jewish people aligned with him to help him defeat Egypt. And their reward for doing that was he came and took them too. All right, verse 17. Here's a name you'll recognize. Antiochus III gives his daughter, Cleopatra, to the Egyptian king, Ptolemy V. That's not the Cleopatra we know, but it's her great whatever grandmother. He does this hoping that she will go in and influence the king of Egypt and make it easier for him to take Egypt. It doesn't work. She falls in love with her husband, betrays her father. Real quickly, 197 to 190, this same king is doing really well. He conquers all these places. He's taken this land from Egypt. And I keep saying Egypt because they're the primary. But in 191, he is defeated, and he has to go back home. If you start in verse 18, we're starting to see rumblings of Rome. Kings of the north have been Syria this whole time, and we're going to start seeing Rome getting involved. 11:19. He'll turn his face back to his own land, but he will stumble and fall and not be found. He was killed by his own people. He was assassinated. Verse 20, one arises, takes his place, and he comes in. He's paying tribute to Rome, so he comes up to Jerusalem, taxes them, and goes into the temple and takes everything out of the temple to pay the taxes. Doesn't work out. They poison him. And he dies. Okay, verse 21. Antiochus Epiphanes begins to reign. 175. You may know who that is? This is one that is one of the biggies. Yes. He is the one who is going to profane the temple. His name was Epiphanes. He was not the rightful heir. He took it by deceit. Demetrius, who was the king's son, was being held in Rome because the tribute was not paid. The people called him, whatever that is, that word play on his name, that means the monster, because that's what he was. So Epiphanes is the one we're going to know about. That's Maccabees, okay? He came in, he removed the high. They started removing and playing with the high priest at this point. They removed the leader, because the high priest would have been the leader. They start removing and putting in a high priest that they want, that they can control. And it happens from here all the way even into Jesus' time. He got many of the Jews on his side by giving them stuff. He was very deceitful. And he decided to go to war against Ptolemy VI. He's defeated mainly because his army deserted. And again, this is historical records. His army deserted and he was defeated in 175. Everything you read about the historical records matches up with what is told in Daniel. And it said they constantly deceived each other in verse 27. So basically they would meet and have these feasts together and tell each other lies about each other. They would tell them one thing when they're really going to do something else. Sound like everybody else these days in politics? They pretended to like each other, but in actuality they were plotting how to kill each other. All right. Same guy. He returns to Israel and he's persecuting the Jews. Okay. Verses 29 and 30, we're into 168 BC. Same guy again. He attacks Egypt, but he's not successful. Egypt had appealed to Rome, and Rome sent an envoy and basically tells him not to attack. Interesting, I think Josephus records this, that he told the Roman envoy that I'll go back home and think about it, and then I'll let you know. And the leader of the envoy draws the first line in the sand, draws a circle in the sand around him, and says, when you step out of this sand, out of the circle, you've got to tell me or I'm going to kill you, according to Josephus. And he went home. He was mad. So what do you think he does when he goes back? Takes it all out on the Jews. This is when he desecrates and profanes the temple. He demands that they cannot observe the Sabbath. They can't make sacrifices. They can't do anything. He's on the point of death. He can't do anything. That's where the Maccabees came in, from 167 to 37 BC. Okay, 36 through 39 is where everything goes south as far as what people believe at this point. Verse 36 is where premillennialism comes in. Everybody goes, okay, at 35, we stop, and now we're going 2,000 years in the future, and that's where everything's going to pick up. Why? That's what happens, because it starts in on the king. It no longer says king of the north, king of the south, it just says king. It's because Rome is back, and the Caesars are there. So they're talking about Caesars now. And the particular one is Augustus. Augustus did all the things that it talks about. He exalted himself. He changed his name from Octavian to Augustus, meaning divine. It states he regarded neither God of his fathers or any others. He was the first that quit building pagan temples to pagan gods and built temples of himself. He regarded no gods. He was God. It fits. Okay. Real quick, 40, the Cleopatra we know and Mark Antony were defeated by Augustus. Augustus, at this point, has Rome as the world empire. He made Herod king, and in verse 41, 42, it talks about he didn't take Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Herod could not take Edom, Moab, or Ammon. It fits. Okay. You skip all the other Caesars to Nero, who reigned 54 to 68. The Parthians from the east, Gauls from the north. That's what it says in 44. He had trouble with the north and the east. They came in and gave him trouble. At the end, here's our 80-70. Florus, the procreator of the Jews, incited the Jews to rebel. Gallius, who's a Roman official, besieges Jerusalem. He's not a military guy, and for some reason he has it besieged, ready to take it. And it says he got no help in verse 45. He just left. They don't know why. Josephus writes, for no apparent reason, he left. And the Jews chase and kill. Nero didn't like it, so he sends Vespasian, and I butchered it, sorry. Vespasian, okay. Who ends up being the next Caesar, because before Vespasian can get there, Nero's committed suicide, go back, pick a new Caesar. He becomes Caesar, sends Titus in AD 69, and we know what happens from there. It's a lot of stuff, but a lot of the historical records match up exactly all the way up to AD 69. And it's Daniel's people. What happened to them? AD 70, they're gone, and that's where we end. So, a lot of information. In a lot of ways, I find it fascinating. It is the most precise, detailed prophecy in a lot of ways in the history in how the world works out, and it fits. And if you take nothing else but chapter 11, the Bible is true. You could take that, and you have to say the Bible is true. That's why it's so important. Hope this was beneficial. I know it's a lot of stuff, but if you have any questions, talk to Lee.
crowd still looks to be down just somewhat. I guess we still have a lot of people out of town traveling, and still have some people that are maybe sick that are not being able to be here. But, you know, a lot of us, I have, some of you a lot longer than I have, been coming to Wednesday night Bible studies all of our Christian lives. And we come together, and normally some man stands before us and gives what we call an invitation, an encouragement of some type to maybe for someone to respond that needs to respond to the gospel. And so we'll do that again tonight. And you know, we all like to be invited to things. We feel like somebody's thought about us and thought enough about us to reach out to invite us to various things, over to our homes or to whatever that might be. But in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28, 29, and 30, it says, the Gospel of Matthew says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Over in the Gospel of John, in John chapter 6, John tells us in verse 35, "And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me," or possibly have been invited to come, "shall never hunger. And he who believes in me shall never thirst." You know, the bread of life that that we've been invited to partake in, oftentimes those people in the early church would get that confused with a physical need, to the manna that was brought to fill their physical need, maybe some type of hunger that they may have had. But there's also the bread of life that Christ can satisfy us all. And that supplies our spiritual needs. And in Peter's lesson, a very familiar lesson that we see in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost, Peter puts it like this in Acts chapter 2, verses 36, starting with verse 36. "Therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God has made this Jesus, who you crucified, both Lord and Christ." Now when they heard this, they were cut to the heart and said to Peter and the rest of the apostles, "Men and brethren, what shall we do?" Then Peter said to them, "Repent and let every one of you be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. For the promise is to you and to your children and to all who are far off, as many as the Lord our God will call." God and Jesus both believe in the power of an invitation. They invite us to believe and to obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I guess the question that's before us today, have you accepted the invitation? Most of us in this assembly have done that. Some years and years and decades ago, some more recently. You're to be commended for that. Put your trust in Jesus Christ. Have you accepted his invitation? But if not, or if you have fallen away due to the vices of sin that we fight every day, this invitation is extended to you. Not only to maybe for you to be baptized, as we're told to do in the New Testament, to wash away those sins, but maybe to confess some type of public sin that you may be caught up in. If that's the case, you might need to make that known. And there are brethren here that will pray for you, pray with you, and there will be no shame at all because we've all fallen short. But if it's more of a private nature, God understands that as well. And you can go into your closet and you can ask God to forgive you. Turn away from those sins and He'll be true and just to forgive you of that. We find comfort in that. And so if there's any way that we can help you tonight, we'd ask you to please come forward.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, come unto me, I am the way. Hearken the loving call, obey. Come, for He loves you so. Only a step, only a step. Come, for He bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet. Jesus the crucified. Open for you the pearly gate. Save once for you. Now watch and wait. Terrible thought to cry too late. Jesus, I come to thee. Only a step, only a step. Come, for He bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet. Jesus the crucified.
We'll be led in our closing prayer by Brother Steve Willis.
Heavenly Father, you blessed us with another midweek Bible study. Not only is it a blessing, but it's a privilege together with people of like faith to study your word. As we study your word, we find out that we're a constant, since this world was created. You're a constant today in our lives. Thank you for being there for us, for loving us, to giving